Welcome to the Maze of Truth. For centuries, the Vatican has stood as a beacon, a symbol of faith, the heart of a global spiritual empire. But what if the foundations of this sacred ground were laid not just with prayers, but with power, with ambition, and yes, with blood? Forget the gentle narratives, forget the sanitized histories. We're pulling back the velvet curtain on the Vatican's origins, and what we find in the shadows of St. Peter's might just shock you. Behind the opulent basilicas and priceless art, behind the pronouncements of peace and love, lies a history written in blood and ambition. This isn't about questioning faith. It's about confronting the uncomfortable truth about how an institution, claiming divine authority, rose to power through earthly means. We're about to peel back the layers of sanctity and delve into the raw, brutal history of the Vatican's dark origins. The story of the Vatican's power doesn't begin with grand pronouncements, but in the shadows of a declining empire. As Rome weakened, a new force began to coalesce: the early Christian Church. Initially a persecuted minority, Christians in Rome were bound by their faith and a growing organizational structure. Local bishops emerged as leaders, providing spiritual guidance and practical support within their communities. Among these, the Bishop of Rome held a certain prestige, linked to the city's imperial history and the martyrdom of St. Peter. In these early centuries, the Bishop of Rome's influence was primarily spiritual. Yet, as the empire crumbled and secular authority waned, a vacuum of power emerged. Into this void stepped the Church, increasingly called upon to mediate disputes, provide aid, and maintain order within the city. Figures like Pope Leo I in the 5th century demonstrated this growing authority. His forceful intervention against Attila the Hun, though perhaps more symbolic than purely decisive, amplified the Bishop of Rome's standing as a protector and leader, not just of the faithful, but of the city itself. Slowly, incrementally, the spiritual authority of the Bishop of Rome began to intertwine with temporal influence. Donations of land and property, often motivated by piety or the need for protection, started to accrue to the Church. These early seeds, planted in the fertile ground of a collapsing empire, would eventually blossom into a formidable earthly power. However, the real claim to power that would shape the destiny of the Vatican for centuries to come, the donation of Constantine. For centuries, this document held immense power. The donation of Constantine, a decree supposedly issued by the great emperor himself, granting the Bishop of Rome dominion over vast swaths of the Western Roman Empire. The story goes that Constantine, cured of leprosy by Pope Sylvester I and newly converted to Christianity, felt compelled to bestow earthly power upon the Church. This forged document claimed Constantine relinquished control of Rome, Italy, and all Western provinces. He supposedly granted Pope Sylvester and his successors the authority and regalia of an emperor. Imagine the implications. Secular rule, divinely sanctioned, flowing directly to the Vicar of Christ. This donation became a cornerstone of the papacy's temporal power for centuries, justifying their territorial claims and political influence. But the truth, unearthed centuries later by astute scholars, was far more earthly. The donation of Constantine? A fabrication, a carefully crafted lie designed to bolster the Church's authority in a time of upheaval. Linguistic analysis, historical inconsistencies, the evidence mounted. The great Constantine never penned these words. Yet for hundreds of years this deception shaped the political landscape of Europe, a testament to the potent influence of a well-forged lie. This ultimately led to violence and papal ambitions. The pursuit of spiritual authority in the hands of mortals often bleeds into the ruthless acquisition of earthly power. The early Church, far from being a purely celestial entity, became entangled in the brutal realities of medieval ambition. The investiture controversy laid bare this duality. Popes claiming divine mandate clashed violently with secular rulers over the appointment of bishops, a struggle not merely for spiritual leadership, but for tangible control over land, resources, and armies loyal to those bishops. Excommunication became a weapon, inciting rebellion and bloodshed. The line between shepherd and warlord blurred. The papal states were not divinely bestowed. They were forged through conquest and maintained by force. Popes, driven by earthly ambition as much as spiritual zeal, commanded armies, besieged cities, and subjugated populations. The cries of the vanquished echoed in the halls where hymns were sung. Justice was often dispensed with the edge of a sword. Dissent met with swift and brutal repression. Consider the various sacks of Rome. While not always directly orchestrated by the papacy, the city, the very heart of their spiritual authority, was repeatedly subjected to the horrors of pillage, rape, and violence, sometimes by those claiming to act in the church's interest. The lust for power, even under the guise of piety, often left a trail of devastation. The ambition to build a temporal kingdom in the name of God demanded earthly tools, armies, fortifications, and the willingness to shed blood. The successors of the humble fisherman Peter became princes of the church, their hands stained, if not directly, then by the actions carried out in their name. The dark irony remains. The pursuit of spiritual dominion often necessitated a descent into the very violence it preached against. The pursuit of absolute spiritual purity when wielded by earthly power led the papacy to the Inquisition. The Inquisition, in its various forms, stands as a chilling testament to this darkness, a system born from the desire to eradicate heresy, but fueled by fear, paranoia, and a brutal efficiency. As new theological ideas emerged, the Church, fearing the erosion of its authority, sought to silence dissenting voices. What began as theological debate curdled into accusations of heresy, a spiritual crime punishable by earthly torment. The inquisitorial machinery evolved, becoming increasingly sophisticated and merciless. Special tribunals were established, operating outside the constraints of secular law, often with secret proceedings and the presumption of guilt. The accused were denied legal counsel, forced to confront unseen accusers, and subjected to methods designed not to uncover truth, but to extract confession. The whispers of heresy echoed in the torture chambers. Under duress, confessions, true or false, were wrung from the accused. The aim was not just punishment but public repentance, a chilling display of the Church's power to enforce absolute conformity of belief. The auto da fe, the act of faith, became a terrifying spectacle. Heretics, deemed threats not only to the Church but to the very fabric of society, were paraded, condemned, and often executed in front of horrified crowds. The flames of the pyre served as a stark warning against deviation. The Inquisition stretched across centuries and continents, adapting its methods and targets, fueled by the unwavering belief in its own righteousness. Fear became a tool of control, silencing intellectual inquiry and stifling dissent in the name of religious purity. The legacy of the Inquisition remains a stark reminder of the dangers inherent when spiritual authority becomes intertwined with unchecked earthly power. Capable of inflicting unimaginable cruelty in the name of God, the papacy became powerful, and with power comes unchecked corruption. The early Church, as it amassed temporal authority and wealth, proved no exception to this grim reality. The lofty ideals of spiritual leadership often buckled under the weight of earthly temptations. Simony, the buying and selling of sacred offices, became rampant. Spiritual roles, meant to be filled by piety and devotion, were instead auctioned off to the highest bidder individuals, often driven by personal gain rather than religious conviction. The flock suffered under shepherds more concerned with their own enrichment. Nepotism further entrenched corruption. Popes and high-ranking clergy used their power to elevate family members, regardless of their merit or spiritual aptitude, to positions of influence and wealth. The Church became a vehicle for familial advancement, its resources diverted to line the pockets of a privileged few. The vast wealth accumulated by the Church, through land ownership, tithes, and various fees, often fueled extravagance and moral decay. While some wealth undoubtedly served charitable purposes, a significant portion was lavished on the personal comforts and ambitions of powerful prelates. creating a stark and hypocritical contrast with the humble origins of their faith. The pursuit of power within the church itself became a breeding ground for intrigue and corruption. Factions formed, alliances were forged and broken, and even the papal throne became a prize in a ruthless game of political maneuvering. Spiritual concerns often took a back seat to the machinations of ambitious men vying for control. The early centuries of the church, while laying the foundation for its enduring influence, were also marred by the corrosive effects of power. The allure of wealth and earthly dominion often overshadowed spiritual principles, leaving a dark stain on the history of an institution that claimed to represent the divine. The seeds of corruption, once sown, would continue to bear bitter fruit in the centuries to come. The journey into the Vatican's origins reveals a history far more complex and at times far more brutal than the serene image often presented. The early seeds of power sown in the fertile ground of a collapsing empire grew into a formidable temporal force, often through means that stand in stark contrast to the spiritual ideals it espoused. From the contested claims of the donation of Constantine to the violence inherent in the establishment and maintenance of the Papal States, and the chilling efficiency of the early inquisitorial impulses, the pursuit of earthly power left an indelible mark. The shadows of ambition and corruption stretched long, shaping not only the institution itself, but the course of European history. Understanding these darker origins is not about condemnation, but about a more complete and honest understanding of a powerful institution's past. It compels us to confront the complexities of history, where faith and power, the sacred and the secular, often become dangerously intertwined. Now we turn the conversation over to you. What aspects of the Vatican's early history did you find most surprising or unsettling? How do you think these origins have shaped the institution we know today? I encourage you to engage respectfully in the comments section. Share your insights, ask questions, and continue your own exploration of this fascinating and often challenging history. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video was informative. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. Take care.